Hey, you guys. I got to be honest, I sure miss being with you. It has been a long time, and I appreciate all the hard work you have been doing. I know it has been a struggle for you, but I appreciate it, and you're making the best of it. That's all I can say. So, we have just a little bit of time left in school. Let's see here. We're We've got the rest of this week, and then next week is a full week of school. And then we have no school on Monday, the 25th. Tuesday, the 26th is a regular day. And then we have finals coming up. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what your other teachers are going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. So, kind of interesting. But anyway, we got two chapters we're going to read today, chapters 24 and 25. So when we left off with Karana, lots of things have been going on in her life. She met her friend. Tutok was her friend. She was with the Aleuts, but she hid from the Aleuts. They did not find her, and the Aleuts eventually left, leaving Karana on her own. Sadly, Rontu died. He just got old and sick, and Rontu died. Karana had her birds, and she fed the otters, and she again tried having life around her. And so time is moving on. We got two chapters, two big, exciting things are going to happen. So one thing, she's going to get a new pet. And another thing, a big, strange, weird, natural disaster is going to happen. So I'm going to share this with you so that you can follow along with me. And then we'll talk about it as we go. So, chapter 26. That winter, I did not go to the reef at all. I ate the things I had stored and left the house only to get water at the spring. It was a winter of strong winds and rain and wild seas that crashed against the cliffs. So I would not have gone out much, even if Rontu had been there. During that time, I made 4 snares from notched branches. In the summer once, when I was on my way to the place where the sea elephants lived, I had seen a young dog that looked like Rontu. He was running with one of the packs of wild dogs, and though I caught only a glimpse of him, I was sure he was Rontu's son. He was larger than the other dogs, and had heavier fur and yellow eyes, and he ran with a graceful stride like Rontu's. In the spring, I planned to catch him with the snares I was making. The wild dogs came to the headland often during the winter. Now that Rontu was gone, and when the worst of the storms were over, I set the snares outside the fence and baited them with fish. I caught several of the dogs the first time, but not the one with the yellow eyes. And since I was afraid to handle them, I was forced to let them free. I made more snares and set these again, but while the wild dogs came close, they would not touch the fish. I did catch a little red fox, which bit me when I took her out of the snare. Yet she soon got over her wildness and would follow me around in the yard, begging for abalone. She was very much a thief. When I was away from the house, she always found some way to get into the food, no matter how well I hid it, so I had to let her go back to the ravine. Often, though, she would come at night and scratch at the fence for food. I could not catch the young dog with a snare, and I was about to give up trying when I thought of the tulache weed, which we sometimes use to catch fish in the tide pools. It was not really a poison, but if you put it in the water, the fish would turn over on their backs and float. I remembered this weed and dug some where it grew on the far side of the island. I broke it up into small pieces, which I dropped in the spring where the wild dogs drank. I waited all day, and at dusk the pack came down to the spring. They drank their fill of the water, but nothing happened to them, or not much. They frisked around for a while as I watched them from the brush and trotted away. Then I remembered zuchal, which some of the men of our tribe used, and is made from ground up seashells and wild tobacco. I made a big bowl of this, mixing it with water and put it in the spring. I hid in the brush and waited. The dogs came at dusk. They sniffed the water and backed off and looked at each other, but at last began to drink. Soon afterwards, they began to walk around in circles. Suddenly, they all lay down and went to sleep. There were 9 of them lying there by the spring. In the dim light, it was hard to tell the one I wanted to take home. But finally I found him. He was snoring as if he had just eaten a big meal. I picked him up and hurried along the cliff, being frightened all the way that he would wake up before I reached the headland. I pulled him through the opening under the fence and tied him to it with a thong and left food beside him to eat and some fresh water. Before long, he was on his feet, gnawing through the thong. He howled and ran about the yard while I cooked my supper. All night he howled, but at dawn, when I went out of the house, he was asleep. While he lay there by the fence sleeping, I thought of different names for him, trying first one, then another, saying them over to myself. At last, because he looked so much like his father, I called him Rantu Aru, which means son of Rantu. In a short time, he made friends with me. He was not so large as Rantu, but he had his father's thick coat and the same yellow eyes. Often, when I watched him chasing gulls on the sand pits or on the reef barking at the otter, I forgot that he was not Rantu. We had many happy times that summer, fishing and going to Tall Rock in our canoe. But more and more now I thought of Tutok and my sister Ulape. Sometimes I would hear their voices in the wind, and often, when I was on the sea, in the waves that lapped softly against the canoe. So, she catches a little fox, which is cute. And to frisk about, the dogs are frisking about. It's this idea of like jumping around and pouncing and just kind of playing. And the water lapped. It's when the water goes against the side of the boat, that kind of sound, or maybe when it comes onto the ocean, that repeated thing. All right. So Karana has a new friend, which is exciting. And she seems like she's doing well. But now we got chapter 27. Something scary happens in 27. So let's go ahead and keep going. After the fierce storms of winter came many days when the wind did not blow. The air was so heavy that it was hard to breathe, and the sun was so hot that the sea was like a sun itself, too bright to look at. The last day of this weather, I took the canoe from the cave and paddled around the reef to the sandpits. I did not take Rantu Aru with me, for while he liked the cold, he did not like the heat. It was good that he did not come with me. The day was the hottest of all, and the sea shimmered with red light. Over my eyes, I wore shields made of wood with small slits in them to see through. I want to show you this real quick, because this is probably what it looked like, something similar to this. Sort of some natural-made sunglasses, which is kind of cool. No gulls were flying, the otter lay quiet in the kelp, and the little crabs were deep in their holes. I pulled the canoe up the beach, which was wet but steaming from the sun. Early every spring, I took the canoe to the sandpits and spread fresh pitch in the cracks that needed it. I worked all this morning, stopping from time to time to cool off in the sea. As the sun climbed high, I turned the canoe over and crawled under it and went to sleep in the shade. I had not slept long when I was suddenly awakened by what I thought was thunder. But was looking out from my shelter, I saw that there were no clouds in the sky. Yet the rumbling sound kept on. It came from a distance, from the south, and as I listened, grew louder. I jumped to my feet. The first thing that caught my gaze was the gleaming stretch of beach on the southern slope of the sandpits. Never in my life on the island had I seen the tide so low. Rocks and small reefs that did not know where that I did not know were under the sea stood bare in the blinding light. It was like another place. I had gone to sleep and wakened on another island. Now, she didn't really wake up on another island. What she's saying is she's looking at the beach and the water has pulled so far out that she sees these rocks and things that she's never seen before. So this is really weird. It's like the ocean has just been pulled really far back. That's really strange. So she's not actually on another island, but when she looked up, she didn't recognize anything because it looked so different. The air was suddenly tight around me. There was a faint sound as if some giant animal were sucking the air in and out through its teeth. The rumbling came closer out of an empty sky, filling my ears. Then beyond the gleam of the beach and the bare rocks and the reefs, more than a league beyond them, I saw a great white crest moving down upon the island. A great white crest. The crest is the white part, the wave, where the water is spilling forth over the top. And she sees this great white crest of this wave. So, do you know what's going to happen? It seemed to move slowly between the sea and the sky, but it was the sea itself. I tore off the shields I wore over my eyes. In terror, I ran along the sandpit. I ran and stumbled and got up and ran again. The sand shuddered under my feet as the first wave struck. Spray fell around me like rain. It was filled with pieces of kelp and small fish. Following the curve of the sandpits, I could reach the cove and the trail that led to the mesa, but there was no time for this. Water was already rushing around my knees, pulling from every direction. The cliff rose in front of me, and though the rocks were slippery with sea moss, I found a hold for a hand and then a foot. Thus, a step at a time, I dragged myself upward. The crest of the wave passed under me and roared on toward Coral Cove. For a time, there was no sound. Then the sea began to seek its old place, running backward in long, foaming currents. Before it could do so, another great wave moved out to the south. Perhaps it would be even bigger than the first one. I looked up. The sea cliff rose straight above me. I could climb no further. So here's what's happened. She's standing on the beach, and this huge tidal wave comes roaring in, and all she can do is climb up on a cliff. She finds a tiny, narrow ledge, but now she's kind of stuck. She doesn't know where to go, doesn't know what to do, and another wave might be coming. I stood facing the rock, with my feet on a narrow ledge and one hand thrust deep into a crack. Over my shoulder, I could see the wave coming. It did not come fast, for the other wave was still running out. For a while, I thought that it would not come at all, because the two suddenly met beyond the sandpits. The first wave was trying to reach the sea, and the second one was struggling toward the shore. Like two giants, they crashed against each other. They rose high in the air, bending first one way, then another. There was a roar as if great spears were breaking in battle, and in the red light of the sun, the spray that flew around them looked like blood. Slowly, the second wave forced the first one backward, rolled slowly over it, and then, as a victor drags the vanquished, moved in towards the island. The wave struck the cliff. It sent long tongues streaming around me so that I could neither see nor hear. The tongues of water licked into all the crevices, dragged at my hands and at my bare feet, gripping the ledge. They rose high above me along the face of the rock, up and up, then spent themselves against the sky and fell back, hissing past me to join the water rushing on towards the cove. Suddenly, all around me was quiet. In the quiet, I could hear my heart pounding and knew that my hand still had its hold on the rock and that I was alive. Night came, and though I was afraid to leave the cliff, I knew that I could never stay there until morning, that I would go to sleep and fall. Neither could I find my way home, so I climbed down from the ledge and crouched at the foot of the cliff. Dawn was windless and hot. The sand pit was strewn with hills of kelp. Dead fish and lobsters and pink crabs lay everywhere, and two small whales were stranded against the rock walls of the cove. Far up the trail that led to the mesa, I found things from the sea. Rantu Aru was waiting at the fence. When I crawled under it, he jumped on me and followed me around, never letting me out of his sight. So just so you know, this is a tidal wave. She was on the beach, and a huge tidal wave came and crashed onto the beach. And the only thing she could do was climb up the cliff a little bit, but the waves were so big that they were still splashing at her. Those are the tongues of water. And eventually, the wave left, and the ocean became normal and calm again. And so she climbed down the cliff, and she just kind of was there at the bottom of the cliff all night. So finally, she's able to get home. I was glad to be home on the high headland where the waves had not come. I had been gone only from one sun to the next, yet it was like many suns, like the time I had gone away in the canoe. Most of the day I slept, but I had many dreams, and when I awoke, everything around me was strange. The sea made no sounds on the shore. The gulls were quiet. The earth seemed to be holding its breath, as though it were waiting for something terrible to happen. At dusk, I was coming back from the spring with a basket of water on my shoulder, walking along the cliff with Rantu Aru. Everywhere, the ocean was smooth and yellow, and it lay against the island as if it were very tired. The gulls were still quiet, perched on their rocky nests. Slowly, the earth began to move. It moved away from my feet, and for a moment, I seemed to be standing in the air. Water tipped out of the basket and trickled over my face. Then the basket fell to the ground. Not knowing what I did, thinking foolishly that another wave was upon me, I began to run. But it was a wave of earth, and it rippled under me along the cliff. Earthquake! As I ran, another wave overtook me. Looking back, I saw many of them coming out of the south like waves in the sea. If you've ever seen an earthquake, it does look like waves. You can actually see the ground go up and down. So probably what happened is when this huge wave came, this tidal wave, there was also an earthquake that was going with it under the ground, and it just finally hits her. The next thing I remember was lying on the ground, and Rantu Aru was beside me, and we were both trying to get to our feet. Then we were running again towards a headland, towards a house that kept moving off into the distance. The opening under the fence had caved in, and I had to pull the rocks away before we could crawl through. Night came, but the earth still rose and fell like great animal breathing. I could hear rocks tumbling from the cliff, falling down into the sea. All night, as we lay there in the house, the earth trembled and rocks fell. Yet not the big one on the headland, which would have fallen if those who make the world shake had really been angry with us. In the morning, the earth was quiet once more, and a fresh wind that smelled of kelp blew out of the northern sea. So she gets this huge tidal wave, all right? The long tongues of water here, this idea of reaching. The tidal wave washed some whales onto the beach, and they were stranded. And then, of course, the wave of earth. Ah, earthquake. Ah. All right. So that's the end of that. Wow. So here's what happened in these two chapters. Karana wanted to catch Rontu's son, and she did, Rontu Aru, and they became friends. And then a tidal wave came and almost washed her into the ocean. And then an earthquake came. Whew. It's a wild couple of days. All right, you guys, miss seeing you. Hopefully you enjoyed this chapter. Have a good day.